Rock's not dead, it's just lame. Hi, if you don't know who I am, my name is Alex Fonseca, musician, songwriter, rock and roller. If you know that riff, you're really cool. Also, this guitar is completely out of tune. Now, I'm a huge rock fan. I make rock music. In fact, my song Matter of Time is out now.
I really love the way you look at me. I think I found myself thinking of you. I think I'll start to warm up to you. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time.
But this has all got me thinking about like my music as a rock artist and how it plays to the larger discourse and culture of rock, and how certain people, rock fans, non-rock fans, are going to like it, you know what I mean? The phrase rock is dead has always kind of bothered me. I've never been able to fully articulate why though, until today, of course. Taken at face value, I feel like it's like pretty self-evidently false. You have like the 100-year-old Rolling Stones selling out arenas. Geese seems to be a thing, and they're doing all right, it seems. You go to any streaming service and you'll see rock songs in the top 100 streams in certain countries and even worldwide. There's a notable influence of rock on, you know, modern types of music. It's clearly still around, at least in some capacity, right? One major facet of the whole rock is dead discourse is that, like, rock music is no longer the dominant music culture of, like, the mainstream pop zeitgeist. It's been overtaken by pop, rap, and even country in some instances. If you look at the major rock acts that are actually selling out arenas, they tend to be on the older side. Young people, artists, bands, you know, they're just more likely to find themselves gravitating to pop, rap, or country, especially if they have like ambitions of reaching a wide audience. And if you look at any like rock festival and you look at the people who are headlining and the people who are going to be playing, they all tend to be mostly just old nostalgia acts rather than new, young, exciting rock bands, you know what I mean? So the natural question for a lot of people, for a lot of rock fans, is why? One major argument that people make as to why rock is no longer the center of youth culture and the mainstream pop sound is that there really has just been a tremendous lack of innovation in rock, and that's why ultimately it hasn't really been as relevant. There are two angles that I think you could attack this argument from. The first is that we have too strict a definition of rock, and the second is that innovation doesn't really matter all that much, at least not right now. Now, to expand on the first angle of there being too strict of a definition of rock, let's just take the average Joe's definition of what rock music is, and a certain thing tends to come to mind for some people, right? You know, big, loud, crunching guitars, big, huge, explosive drums, a certain rock vocals, you know, heavy metal vocals. And the composition of the band is usually made up of four presumably Caucasian guys, you know. Now, that's not just like a little joke, you know what I mean? There is definitely some degree of racial coding when it comes to drawing genre definitions and lines and even defining certain music cultures. I mean, if we were to ask, like, is Steve Lacy rock? Is Rico Nasty rock? Is JPEG Mafia rock? Is Olivia Rodrigo rock? There are a lot of people who are, you know, within the rock culture, who are rock fans, that would tell you, absolutely not. What the fuck are you talking about? Now, personally, I would say that they are, and if you listen at least a little bit to their music, you could definitely see, like, a definite rock influence in terms of the sounds, in terms of the attitudes, in terms of the aesthetics, and even in terms of the approach when it comes to recording. But for a lot of people, you're still going to have that knee-jerk reaction to say that, how could they be rock? I mean, rock is this thing, and anything outside of that is not rock. And yeah, you can see how that might be a problem. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't utility in drawing, you know, lines and definitions as to what certain genres are and what they tend to sound like. I mean, if you asked me for a smooth R&B record and I handed you a Ramones album, you would probably look at me a little funny. Like, let's just not, like, forget that the drawing of boundaries, it's not divorced from the socio-political culture that those lines are drawn in the first place. And the lines that are drawn and the lines that matter are drawn by those with a degree of influence and power within rock culture spaces, whether it be, you know, rock criticism, rock fandom as a whole, you know what I mean?
Just to expand on this point a little bit, because I don't think I was 100% clear with what I meant in this section of the video. If you want to understand something like, say, music or a piece of art, you have to contextualize it to the time and place that it was developed in, right? So if we want to understand rock music and have a historically accurate and responsible reading of what it was and how it developed, you have to take into account that rock was developed in the 1950s, largely based on black music that had developed prior, like blues and other forms of music. And you have to take into account the social and political relations of the time. You know, it was a time of Jim Crow, it was a time of just general racism and bad shit. And because of that, rock culture was shaped by those dynamics, whether it intended to or not, right? I'm not saying that there was like some master scheme or anything. I'm just saying that if you're trying to understand something, you have to take the historical context into account. And the historical context of rock is that in the 1950s and especially in the 1960s, you had a lot of white rock bands getting a lot of popularity and notoriety that black musicians, the ones who developed the genre in the first place, were simply not getting. And because of that, a lot of white audiences were centered as a result of that. Add on top of that, the white tastemakers, white critics like Robert Christgau, Lester Bangs, you know, other guys in that space, and notable rock DJs, they had uh, the privilege to be a writer in the first place. A lot of those opportunities were not given to black writers and black artists just in general in that time period. But you also have to take into account that they were responsible in setting the standard for what good rock and roll music was. And that's inherently going to contain biases and just a seed of racial discrimination, whether those writers intended to or not, right? This was just a natural result of the systems and the time period in which rock was developed, right? So, of course, rock culture, especially in retrospect, it's quite very evidently still steeped in just kind of casual, passive, and sometimes outright active racism. So, just wanted to throw that out there.
If we can expand our definition of rock, and if we can conceive that rock is and always has been more than what we thought it was, then it becomes clear that rock is very much still innovating and very much not dead. I mean, tell me to my face that modern rappers aren't just cooler, more in touch, more modern versions of rock stars. I mean, if you did, I would probably slap you in the face. The attitudes of rebellion, the attitudes of innovation against the attitudes of going against the grain, of going against the society that many say that rock exemplifies, or even say that is exclusive to rock, are still very much alive. Loud, explosive, aggressive, fast music is still very much out there if you're looking for it. It's just not in the same form that it used to be in. And yeah, I mean, that is definitely one angle that you could take. Okay, let's just say for the sake of argument that you don't really buy that first argument, that first angle of attacking the whole innovation argument. And let's just say that you do, in fact, want to take the average Joe definition of what rock is. You know, loud guitars, loud drums, rock vocalists, you know, screaming in your face, you know, ah. You know, okay, fine, we can definitely do that. That's fair enough. And if you do take that definition, then rock definitely has not been innovating for quite some time. And it's hard to see that changing. I just don't know that there's a lot to do in the whole rock paradigm, you know, especially as we conceptualize it. I mean, it can only get so heavy, it can only get so slow, it can only get so abstract and weird before it turns into potentially something else, you know what I mean? But the question then arises, is any popular art really innovating at this point? I mean, like right now, there's a Spider-Man movie out, and it's probably like the 10th Spider-Man movie that has existed up until this point. There's a 5th Toy Story. There's probably going to be 6 to 10 more Spider-Man movies. There might be 5 to 10 more Toy Story movies in this century. Why? Because they make money. We're in this stage where a lot of new art, where a lot of challenging art, where a lot of potentially subversive art just isn't getting funded because people are sticking with what sells. We're at a particularly precarious state in terms of like first world economics, and let it be known that this is very much a first world problem. You know what I mean? Like, we have the wealth and the time, the luxury to be able to invest in art, and I don't think that's something that should be lost on us at any point. Imperialism is really bad. We're just at a point of history where we are really like seeing a lot of derivative art in general, and that is the art that is tending to sell, that is tending to get funded, that is tending to get promoted. Now, I'm not even necessarily saying that this is always a bad thing. I mean, a lot of great art, a lot of great music that is derivative is out there, it's popular, and it's making an emotional connection with people, and I think that's ultimately what's important. I don't think that in this particular point in history, like, people really care that that art is innovating. I think they're just looking for other things. You know what I mean? I think they're looking for craftsmanship. I think they're looking for things that they can relate to. And I think rock, in a lot of ways, struggles with that. And we'll put a pin in that for just a second. And also, let's not forget that the popularity of a certain art form will be tied to the material conditions in which that art form is created and is meaningful in any sense.
Hi, editing Alex back again. To clarify, what I mean by material conditions in this portion of the video is take the stuff that I was talking about in the first time that editing Alex came, about white supremacy and its particular stage of development in the 20th century when rock was developing, and you add cold hard economic and historical developments that had a major role in shaping how rock formed and how things kind of played out, right? In the United States in the 1950s and 60s, we're post World War II and pre a whole bunch of other fucking wars, and the United States is nowhere near as fucking devastated as like Europe after World War II, and because of that, add on top of that like actual economic policy that was advantageous towards the United States and its development, the U.S. becomes a fucking superpower militarily and economically, unfortunately, and it's still that way, and they're still raining fucking anyways. All I'm saying is that those historical and economic developments played a huge role in how rock shaped itself. If you didn't have those historical and economic developments happen in the way that they did, rock itself would not have played out like we understand it to have played out, right? And because we were just in a different stage of capitalist development in the 1950s and 60s when rock was developing than we are now, of course things are just like not the same, right? We have iPhones now, and one major difference also in like the stages of capitalism that we were in, wealth in the 20th century in that particular stage of development was definitely more rooted in like owning tangible things like infrastructure, buildings, equipment, raw materials. And now it has a lot more to do with like debt and finance stuff and a whole bunch of boring stuff that is very complicated, but very real, right? It really affects how society, art, and culture is like made up. And if you move any one of those components, society, art, culture look very different, is all I'm saying.
Those were the conditions in which rock became popular, right? And the conditions that kept rock popular are no longer the conditions that we live in. Right now, we're in this neoliberal, imperialist, capitalist fucking hellhole that we're in. And that's why I think art is so derivative now. I don't think there's the time or the patience or just the space that a lot of rock artists had in the 20th century to expand, that a lot of artists had in general to expand the sounds of what we consider music. And I also don't think that any of what could potentially be subversive or new types of music can even really be created in this stage of capitalism.
Okay, I think some more elaboration is in order. What I mean by this is that let's go back to those material conditions that we were kind of just talking about. Say it's the 1964, you just saw the fucking Beatles, and you think rock and roll is just the coolest fucking thing you've ever seen in your life, and you want a part of that, right? You get your buddies, who are all, again, presumably white. Yes, this all does matter. You buy some cheap instruments, you get in your garage, you start playing and writing rock songs, and you're kind of off to the races, right? And the history of rock was very much that. And not just that, there's just a lot of space for expansion in terms of sound, in terms of aesthetic, in terms of attitudes, in terms of speed, aggression, all of that, right? This all assumes a level of time and space and economic comfort to be able to invest in in not just your own rock band and its development, but also rock music and its kind of wider cultural development as a whole. And a lot of that time, money, and kind of opportunity just isn't available right now in 2026, right? And so because of that, there just isn't time to be innovating, right? We're just in a particular stage of capitalism where people are working a shit ton of hours, way more than they were working in the late 20th century, in the mid 20th century, right? And because of that, like, not only are we seeing investments in derivative art because it sells, it's kind of the only art we have time to even make at this point, right? Because there are so many pressing concerns like, hey, I need to feed myself. Hey, the world has gone to shit. Oh, hey, things are just scary right now. Maybe the top, the top of my mind is not just going towards how can I innovate music.
And that's why when new compelling art does tend to break through, like Obsession, for example, it is, like, oh my god, it's the exception that proves the rule. So if it's not innovation that's holding rock and roll back, then what is? Well, let's go back to the term rock is dead, and let's go back as to why it bothers me so much. I think that the term is, at best, kind of myopic and just dumb, and I think at worst, it's a bit of a dog whistle. Any discourse on art, including music, they're not created in a vacuum, right? They are tied to the socio and political circumstances of any given time period, right? This is the kind of the argument that I was making earlier. Rock culture, and by extension rock music, has always had a certain stink to it that is very reactionary and very ugly. And it kind of has always been there.
I'm back again because I did not record this section particularly well. I think the most primary example of this kind of reactionary tendency is Disco Demolition Night. I mean, I feel like it is the ultimate display and the ultimate summation of years of tension and self-identification and just racism that you've ever seen. It was a night in which a lot of white dudes, pretty much entirely white dudes, burned a whole bunch of disco albums and really anything that was created by non-white, non-male, non-straight artists, like it went for disco, but they were burning like Stevie Wonder records and shit. Like obviously this is indicative of a larger problem of discrimination, of institutional racism and internalized values, right? And I mean, yeah, I mean, there really isn't any way to read that night other than like the acting out of already pre-established values that were deemed to have been violated in some way by disco, by its shiny production, by the ability that, God forbid, people wanted to fucking dance to music. Oh my God. The fact that it was created by, queer people, the fact that it was associated with, black people and women and, the very queer people and black people and women who were integral to the scene. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, that's what I mean by that kind of reactionary bent. And it's not just that night, but everything leading up to it, the attitudes that were established by rock critics, by rock fans, and just white people generally. And if you're one of those people,
you might start to associate with like-minded people and put yourself in a bubble that is outside of evolving tastes and evolving politics. And yeah, that's essentially the story of 20th century rock culture. There's plenty of history of rock artists, of rock fans, and rock critics, especially rock critics with a great degree of influence in terms of sales, in terms of culture, and just in terms of just general sway in like the music culture, who have a history of being dismissive of any music that falls outside of rock aesthetics or rock values.
And I'll fucking say names, man. Fuck you, Billy Corgan. Fuck you, Rick Beato. I got some more smoke for that second motherfucker here in just a second. Fuck both of you. Fuck you. Oh, and Robert Christgau, too. I mean, he's a good writer, but man, what the fuck was this?
And there's also just as much of history of, rock critics who tend to be white, privileged, upper-class members of society being extremely nasty, racist, and homophobic towards musicians that they didn't like. And they tended to not like their music for pretty stupid reasons, which ultimately boiled down to the music not being rock. Now there's a name for this type of mentality. It's called rockism. Um, now you might hear that and be like, rockism, what the fuck is that? Well, rockism is essentially just white supremacy. I'm sorry, rock supremacy. I know I keep coming back to this, but the drawing of boundaries, genre labeling, the kind of division of cultures is going to reflect that the socio-political conditions that those boundaries were drawn in, right? Rockism exemplifies this perfectly, right? The history of rock is very much the history of cultural appropriation, the history of white supremacy, the history of 20th century capitalism, all distilled into a music movement. There's a reason why Elvis Presley is considered the king of rock and roll and not Chuck Berry, who had way more to do with the actual development of rock and roll than Elvis ever did. This white rock culture and white rock critics within this culture, who, like I said, come from privileged backgrounds. I mean, how many rock critics do you know from the 1960s or 70s that are black? Because of their ability and their privilege, they're able to set the terms of what rock is and what it can be, and what like the values and supposed like characteristics of rock are, even if those values and characteristics are completely ahistorical and completely false or just like fucking incoherent, right? This is why you get the obsession with authenticity, even if that is kind of dubious and arbitrary, right? That's why you get the obsession with the so-called creators of rock music, which are often just, you know, the first rock bands who were white who got popular. And that's also what creates the need to distance rock and roll and rock culture from other culture, from more mainstream culture, from pop culture, you know what I mean? Now, you could argue that this tendency of rock culture to silo itself off from mainstream culture as being like essentially what rock culture is, right? In the 1950s, it was white artists distancing themselves from black artists and, you know, labeling what they were doing as different and new when in fact it wasn't. In the 1970s, it was disco demolition night. And in the 2020s, it's rock is dead discourse. It's guitarists on social media just wanking around and showing their technical chops and not actually writing compelling music that people want to listen to. I think it's so funny that the popular tastemakers within rock are old fucking geezers like Rick Beato and whoever the fuck this guy is. While other genres have way larger, way younger, and way more open-minded tastemakers, like think like of all the hip-hop streamers that there are, representatives of rock are, you know, white guys. And it's not just that they're white guys, but that they tend to have these reactionary fucking rockist stances, right? And they view music entirely from this perspective, and they especially view modern music as being inferior to older music because of the values or so-called differences in style, aesthetics, or production techniques. And I also don't think that it's an accident that the remnants of rock culture that are still somewhat popular within youth culture come from punk and alternative scenes, which are seen as way more open-minded and way more socially progressive and way more like just socially cool. I mean, isn't rock and roll about being subversive, about pushing society forward, about rebellion? I think this is why the whole rock is dead discourse bothers me so much. I mean, when a lot of people say rock is dead, they also use it as a way of saying that music is dead, right? That modern music sucks because it's basically not the Beatles, because it's not Led Zeppelin, because it's not The Who. They all make the same fucking arguments as to why modern music is just not the same as it used to be, right? People don't record with analog production anymore. They don't use analog technology. They don't know how to play their instruments. They don't write their songs. They have 10 songwriters. It's not just one guy in his room coked out of his mind. Oh no, people use auto-tune. People use a fucking DAW. They quantize stuff. That's why modern music sucks. And that's why rock music isn't popular anymore, because we're real artists and we make real music. We play real... This is how motherfuckers sound, and this is the stink that rock culture and rock fans have on them. And I also think that's why it is hard to be a person of color in these spaces, if you do have the luxury of, you know, playing music and being at least somewhat aware of the discourse. And look, one thing these people are right about, and I hate to say this, is that, yeah, like AI AI slop is not music. I know they've taken a huge hardline stance against AI, and they're right for that. But like again, they're right for the wrong reasons. This is because they are just being pricks, and they happen to be being a prick about the right thing for once, right? Cue the Onion article meme, right? If you love rock like I do, and you want it to be relevant because you think it's awesome like I do, there's just a certain challenges that us rock musicians have in the future. One is to make music that people actually want to listen to, right? To not completely divorce ourselves from the mainstream, from modern audiences. Now, make the music that you want to make. I'm not saying to not make the music you want to make, but just keep in mind that there are more people who you could potentially make fans of a style of music that they otherwise would not have been by just being cool and by making music that sounds good regardless of genre, right? Two, don't be a fucking dickhead about new types of music, about music that isn't rock. Now, I don't think this is as much of a problem with younger audiences. There are plenty of young people who can appreciate different parts of different music cultures. I definitely think that is the case, but I'm just talking about the old heads who are fucking freaking the fuck out that people use autotune, and that they don't write the songs by themselves. I'm sorry. I'm just tired of this shit. And the last thing is just chill out. Look, rock is not awesome because it's the greatest form of music ever made. It's because it was the only genre of music that stood for rebellion or whatever the fuck. No, it's awesome because it's awesome. It's cool cultural moments, you know what I mean? It really was huge in the development of the 20th century and other forms of music. It's awesome. Rock is awesome. But it is not the end all be all of music, and to treat it like that is also just disrespectful to other artists. And I think it's a bit disrespectful to the legacy of rock. Rock is awesome because it's not perfect, because there are mistakes, because you know what I mean. I don't even know what I'm saying. I think I've kind of completely lost my train of thought at this point. But if you can get anything out of this, please stop using the term "rock is dead" as an excuse to separate yourself from other culture at large. Challenge yourself to make music that people would want to listen to, and not just hardcore rock guitar rah fans, but people who otherwise maybe wouldn't have thought that rock music could be for them. You know what I mean? That's how Chuck Berry thought about music. He thought about commercial viability all the time. That's how the Beatles did it. That's how any mainstream rock band from the 20th century did things. Except for, like, you know, obviously, like, all the hardcore and straight edge bands who didn't give a fuck about the shit. They were doing something else completely. You know what I mean? Most of them were thinking about, hey, how can I disseminate my ideas, my musical taste, in a way that is appealing to the most people out there. I don't know. I'm just fucking tired. Rock is unpopular because it's lame. It's perceived as lame. It's perceived as reactionary. And yeah, just cut that shit out. Cut that shit out. Just make good music and appreciate good music. And just be respectful. Just be cool. Peace and love to all y'all.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching the video. It's been a while since I've shown my face on camera a little bit. Been really busy. Obviously, I dropped the 2 songs, Damned to Hell in a matter of time. That has taken a lot of priority over the last couple of weeks, but I haven't actually had time to sit and record my thoughts, which I want to do more often. I've actually been in the middle of moving. I just moved into a new place, into a new city. That has taken a lot of my time. I also work 2 other jobs, so it's not always easy pumping out content, but, you know, alas, it's something that I have to do. It's something that I wanted to get off my mind. Matter of Time, Damned to Hell are streaming on all streaming platforms. Go check them out. They're great songs, I think, in my opinion. I'm also here to announce that my 3rd single, Who Are You, will be released on Tuesday, August 11th, and I'll be doing promotion for that very soon. I'm very tired. I'm just going to get this video uploaded, you know, edited, then uploaded, you know. But yeah, more content soon. I haven't forgotten about y'all. This we're still grinding, you know what I mean? And yeah, much love to all of you.